far. But China and Russia have declared a no-limits partnership. What does this mean in terms of geopolitics? Let's bring in our correspondent in Beijing, Patrick Fok. Patrick, a very good afternoon to you. Good morning here in South Africa. So Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin is meeting ahead of the games, standing shoulder to shoulder. What's the current posture towards the West? What are we reading into this?
Well, it was an important meeting and certainly intended to send a message to the West. I mean, China's been talking a lot about not wanting to mix politics and sports, but here you had President Xi Jinping meeting with Vladimir Putin on the sidelines of the opening ceremony at the Bird's Nest Stadium. And, you know, the significance really can't be understated. It happened at a time when many Western countries had staged diplomatic boycotts of the Games, and many other Western governments and declined invitations to come, citing COVID's strict COVID-19 rules. I mean, Russia and China have been getting closer and closer together. On Friday, they signed new deals for Moscow to provide China with more gas at a time when Moscow has been having difficulties with a lot of its European customers over the Ukraine question. And, you know, this is just one area of partnership. There have been areas of partnership on trade, technology, military exercises, and so on and so forth. And, you know, one has to say that the two sides very likely wanted to signal to the West that they are getting closer and closer together.
What are the lingering disputes, though, Patrick, between Russia and China? And how have Xi and Putin been able to see past those differences?
Well, Russia and China are aligned in many areas. I mean, there's some disagreement over Afghanistan and its future, but at the same time, they both do seem to want to be part of rebuilding that country. But I think a lot of people would say that this is a partnership of convenience in many ways, because the two countries are becoming increasingly isolated from the West, and it suits both sides to band together and work with one another.
With regards to the Winter Games, what impact will the United States diplomatic boycott have on these games? What are you hearing on the ground?
Well, I think from a practical perspective, it doesn't really have any material impact. I mean, the games have been getting underway as you would expect. It isn't a good look for China necessarily, but I don't think people in China are particularly bothered about that. And people here at this point are just looking forward to seeing more of the sports. I think that overall, though, we can see with what's happened with this Winter Olympic Games, it's just kind of highlighted the sort of differences between the West and China at this point. I mean, at the same time, there's a couple of interesting things going on here. We talked about not wanting to mix politics and sports, but there has been an awful lot of political ongoings happening here in Beijing. Just in the last day, we've had the WHO head, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, meet with Chinese Premier Li Keqiang to discuss cooperation or further cooperation on the origins of COVID-19. A lot of scientists have been unsatisfied with the results of the fact-finding mission that took place here in China. And we've also had the UN General Secretary talk with China about wanting to get transparent and credible access to Xinjiang next year, something that the UN Human Rights Council has been trying to do for a very long time indeed.
Reportedly, tensions continue to rise between Russia and NATO over Ukraine. Talk to us, though, what sort of impact is this having at the Winter Games with regards to athletes from Ukraine and athletes from China? Any cold shoulders being given, mind the pun?
Yeah, well, there was that sort of moment, and we don't know how real it was, but there have been these images of Vladimir Putin at the Bird's Nest Stadium opening ceremony on Friday night, apparently with his eyes closed asleep when Ukraine's team entered the stadium. That was one notable thing. I think one of the concerns that analysts had talked about was the possibility of Russia invading Ukraine during the games, which would be detrimental to China, certainly. This is an incredibly important event for the country, and China certainly wouldn't want something like that, analysts say, overshadowing the Winter Olympic Games. But I mean, what happened on Friday in that meeting between President Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, with the two sides supporting one another, essentially. We had China backing Moscow over its concerns about NATO's expansion, and Russia in turn backing China of the Taiwan question. I think that we are likely to see those two countries partner and agree with one another on a lot more things in the future.
Patrick, with regards to COVID-19 and the Winter Games, China enforcing strict measures in order to prevent further spread?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about COVID-19, hasn't there? I mean, there's been a resurgence of the virus in the Chinese capital since the middle of the month, so that's put a lot of people on edge. But of course, there is this sort of separate closed-loop management system that they're operating under, where athletes and other participants are essentially segregated from the rest of the country, and that's why there aren't any spectators or international spectators at these games. I think overall, though, the IOC has been repeatedly saying or suggesting that things are sort of happening within their expectations. I think there's been around 300 athletes and other games-related personnel that have been tested as positive, which is a relatively small number when you consider the amount of tests that have been done. But there has been a bit of attention turned towards some dissatisfaction over the quarantining or the isolation facilities that athletes are having to go to when they test positive. In particular, the German team has been saying, that the rooms are just not suitable. But the Chinese side have also said that they are working to try and rectify these issues as best as they can.
Well, live for us in Beijing. Thank you very much indeed, sir, for your reporting. No doubt we'll keep a close eye on what's happening in that country. The 2022 Winter Olympic Games underway, but sports and politics kind of intersecting there in Beijing. No doubt our correspondents all around the world will be keeping us up to date with the geopolitical stance from the various countries involved in what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening in Russia, and now what's happening in China. Remember, we have an interest. China, Russia, part of the BRICS nation. South Africa, part of that as well. So we will keep you up to date with all the latest. Quick break. More news next.